This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit TemptationsTreats.com to learn more.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good morning. Welcome to Let the Record Show. I'm your co-host, Jesse Garcia. I'm the chairman of the Suffolk County Republican Committee and have the pleasure of also serving as the vice chair for the downstate of the state Republican Party. With me this morning is Eric Levine, renowned author, lawyer, essayist, and just an all-around good guy that it looks like we're going to be, maybe trying to push out Judge Weinberg a little bit here. Just joking around. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing just great. I think Richard's going to regret going on vacation.
He's never going to go on. He's never going to give us the mic again and not be here to control it. So let's just jump right into it. And then, we were speaking off air as we were preparing for the show. This recent action taken by the Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice, our Attorney General Biondi has initiated litigation against Kathy Hochul, the Attorney General Letitia James, and the Commissioner of the DMV, and it being about federal monies being used and spent, and basically the state of New York being a sanctuary state. And that, I'm going to get into the litigation. You can get into the law side of it. But simply, we also saw here DOGE, the Department on Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk. That department and the Trump administration withheld about $59 million that was earmarked for the city of New York for illegal migrants being housed in luxury hotels in the city of New York because New York State's a sanctuary state, New York City is a sanctuary city, and that these dollars were actually being sent to New York City for these purposes from the FEMA account. Now, listen, we are caring people. I believe that it's right that we should help others, but this is the same FEMA under the Biden administration that has had trouble helping residents immediately, just recently, in recovering from the August storms in North Carolina. They're having problems in assisting families and communities in California as a result of the wildfires. And certainly they were not the best at assisting the state of Florida with multiple hurricanes that came roaring through that state. And, Eric, being the Republican politician here, let's not forget that amongst the talking points and guidelines that the FEMA was given under the Biden administration, they were told right there in writing that they should bypass any home that had a Trump sign on it. What do you say to this? Where is the litigation here? Because my understanding that the basis of this, which is a second lawsuit that followed against the state of Illinois, because they are a sanctuary state and the city of Chicago has not been cooperating with ICE. That's the first litigation that they had. And now we are here in the city of New York and the state of New York. What are your thoughts?
So thank you for that. So the lawsuit is filed. It's United States versus and the defendants that you've named, Hochul, James, and the chairman and the DMV. It's filed in the federal court, Northern District of New York in Albany. And the allegations are primarily that the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles issues licenses to illegal aliens. So it has addresses where you can track down people who are here illegally and who may have committed crimes while here or committed crimes before they came here. And the New York State policy law, in fact, is that in the event that ICE or other federal agencies reaches out to the DMV and asks for the address of this illegal alien who has also committed a crime, the DMV is not permitted under New York law to give that information to federal authorities. It's crazy, but it gets even crazier. The law also provides that in the event that the DMV becomes aware that a federal agency has learned of the address of this illegal alien who has also committed a crime, that they affirmatively are required to reach out to that individual to warn them that a federal agent may be coming to enforce federal immigration laws. You can't make this stuff up. So Pam Bondi, to her credit, has initiated this lawsuit, cutting off funding to New York for putting these laws in place, and insisting that these laws be repealed, or that the federal courts find these laws unconstitutional, which they are because of the supremacy clause in the U.S. Constitution, which provides that there are certain laws and certain policies that are solely within the discretion and purview of the federal government, and immigration is one of them. So hopefully Pam Bondi will be successful in this lawsuit. You talk about the DOJ, and you talk about what's going on with running out of funding at FEMA to help American citizens who have been victimized by hurricanes in North Carolina, fires in Los Angeles. Well, there's not enough money to do the rebuilding there. There's always seems to be enough money, certainly under the Biden administration, to come up with billions of dollars to house illegal aliens in luxury apartments and in luxury hotels. That flow of money never seemed to run out, and that now seems to be rolling back. But what I think, in large part, what we're seeing is evidence that the Democrats have learned absolutely nothing from this election. They are still deluding themselves into believing that all of their great failing was messaging, when in fact their great failing was policy. And there's not enough lipstick in the world you could put on that pig that could help them. So they're out there still fighting for open borders. They're out there opposed to deporting people who didn't just come here illegally, but who had committed crimes before coming here or committed crimes after coming here. Roughly 80% of the United States citizenry supports a closed border, supports deporting illegal aliens who have committed crimes. You look at the issue of transgender rights. 80% of the American population opposes men participating in women's sports, and yet the Democrats are doubling down on that. When Ken Martin was elected head of the DNC recently, and he took the stage to accept his nomination or his election as the head of the DNC, who was standing right over his right shoulder? Ilhan Omar. Omar.
Absolutely.
I mean, what is that? What message is that sending to American supporters of the State of Israel? What message is that sending to people who are opposed to anti-Semitism and hate, or who love America? Ilhan Omar is among the worst of the progressives of the squad. And this is who is standing next to this guy when he is accepting his election and saying what a great day this is for the Democratic Party. If Ken Martin wants Ilhan Omar to be the face of the Democratic Party, they truly have learned absolutely nothing and are going to find themselves in a death spiral if they don't wake up and understand it's not the messaging, it's the policies.
Absolutely. And as we go forward here, we've seen that there's been problems. Everyone is in agreement that we should deal with the criminals and move forward from there first. But if I'm not mistaken, and you mentioned about a law, but I thought that New York State was a sanctuary state as a result of executive order, which could be repealed by the executive at any time. I think the measures that you've spoken to may be in law right now, and I do think in New York City, sanctuary status was done by local legislation. Am I right on that point, or am I off a bit?
No, I think you're right, but as it relates to the DMV, to the lawsuit relating to the DMV, I believe that is actually New York State law regarding that prohibits the DMV from disclosing that information to federal agents, and to the extent that they get that information, they are required to reach out and warn the illegal alien that the ICE may be on their way. That's my understanding.
Yes, but even under the Department of Justice, as they're and ICE going through these raids and such on illegal migrants who are criminals, one of the issues that the Attorney General is dealing with is still the deep state basically leaking information on these raids. We've seen that in Colorado. We've seen it, I believe, in California, that we have members of the FBI leaking information to those states or to those localities that when raids are coming. And just recently, a confidential memo from the FBI appeared in the New York Times as the basis of a story, which basically outlines the procedures and the coordination and the locations that ICE is going to be going to undertake these raids to eliminate criminals, violent criminals from our streets. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, police officers and FBI agents are law enforcement, or supposed to be law enforcement officials. And if we find, whether it's at the city level, the state level, or the federal level, law enforcement officials who are not only not enforcing the law, but are breaking the law, or encouraging or enabling others to break the law, those individuals must be fired immediately and, if appropriately, prosecuted, because that's aiding and abetting a crime. So if what you're describing is actually happening, these officials should be in harm's way. They should be fired. No individual, particularly a law enforcement officer, should take it upon themselves to decide what laws they will uphold and what laws they won't, and what laws they will actually affirmatively break. I think, though, with the appointment and confirmation of Kash Patel to head the FBI, I think some of this is going to stop. I think he's going to be insistent that it stop, and the rank and file. I mean, let's take a step back. Let's be clear here. The overwhelming majority of the rank and file, whether it's the FBI or any government agency or the New York City Police Department, the overwhelming majority of the rank and file are wonderful civil servants. They abide by the law, they take their duties and responsibilities seriously, and they do them well. And they continue to earn our trust and respect. But there are some that don't. And the time has come to start weeding those folks out. And I think you're going to start seeing some of that weeding out with Kash Patel. I think the bigger issue is when the higher level officials, and this is what we've witnessed over the last few years at the FBI, when the higher level officials take it upon themselves not just to pick and choose laws, but to decide on policy, irrespective of what their boss, the president, says. That's when we start running into problems. And that kind of stuff really has to be weeded out. If you don't like the policy, your obligation is to resign and then say and do whatever you want outside the office. But if you continue to serve in that office, you are obligated to follow the directives of your superiors. And if you don't like it, quit.
And just to be clear, that does not mean that the Department of Justice or the FBI is not independent. That is what their task is, to uphold the law and to prosecute the law to keep us safe. So I know the Democrats have been going around here saying their new line is constitutional crisis. You know, we're eliminating contracts for, $50 million in condoms for Gaza. We're eliminating tens of millions of dollars for DEI training in Serbia and such. That is what I'm trying to get at is those are decisions that have to be made. And once the administration has put into place policy to do that, it is the responsibility of each and every one of us to move forward, who's employed by the federal government, to follow the policies of the elected representative there. However, when it comes to the Department of Justice, it means that even though they work and are appointed by the president, that they still maintain an independence that's critical to the rule of law. And that's something we haven't seen over the last 4 years, especially in the Department of Justice under Biden, and dare I say, even during the 8 years of Obama.
Well, let's talk about this independence issue. The Department of Justice is within the executive branch. Their ultimate boss is the President of the United States. The President is the only elected official in the country that's elected nationally. So to say that there's this branch of government within the executive branch that operates independently, I take issue with that. It can't work completely independently because it's in the executive branch, and the head of the executive branch is the president. And to say that if the president has too much control and these agencies have less control, that's democratic, that's insane. Who elected the U.S. attorney from Montana? Who elected the U.S. attorney from New York? They're appointed. They're appointed by the president. The president is the only one who's elected. So in this bizarro world of democracy, unelected officials need to have the power to direct policy, and the elected official needs to be second seated to the view of these unelected officials. That's insane. The president is the one who's elected. When Joe Biden was president, he was in charge. Now Donald Trump is president, he's in charge. And we get back to the point I made before. If you don't like the policy and you can't carry it out in good conscience, quit. I'm being told that we are running out of time on this first segment, and we'll continue in a minute.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Nurses, are you tired of spending weeks or even months finding the perfect job that matches your specialty with your ideal shift and salary? LinkedIn has improved your job search experience. Search by specialty, the shift you want to work, and the salary you want to make. Go to linkedin.com/nurses and begin searching today. That's linkedin.com/nurses.
Note, side effects may include less time finding the perfect job, working a shift that you love with a salary that can take you to St. Thomas, Jamaica, and continuous smiling because of how simple this process was.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50. Code listen50. Terms and conditions apply.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We're back on Let the Record Show. This is Eric Levine with co-host Jesse Garcia. Richard Weinberg, I believe, is lounging somewhere on a chaise in Florida, working on his tan. So we're looking forward to seeing him when he returns, tan, rested, and ready. So let's turn our attention now to foreign policy and what's going on in Israel and Gaza, the status of the ceasefire, and the controversial Trump vision for what should happen in Gaza. So first, let's talk about the ceasefire. We'll remember that the ceasefire was broken down into 3 parts. The first part would be an exchange of 33 Israeli hostages in exchange for roughly 1,000 Palestinians who have been tried, many and held in prison, many of whom are being held in prison for murder and serving life sentences. So innocence for criminals, innocence for terrorists, but that just seems to be the way this part of the world works. And over this 32-day period, in the first phase, Israel would withdraw from certain areas. Netzarim crossing, which was separated the north from the south Gaza. Israel would withdraw from that and set up a buffer zone between Israel and the western border of Gaza, inside of Gaza, and the Israelis would continue to maintain a buffer zone in the Philadelphia corridor, which is in the south of Gaza, between Gaza and Sinai, or the Egyptian border. But the Gazans would be allowed to start returning to their homes to the extent that they still exist. So that phase, so what did we see in the first phase? In the first phase, Hamas would release some of these hostages, but like the savages and animals that they are, they first made sure that they would parade young women, 18, 19, 20-year-old women, through a sea of people screaming at them, put them on stages and have people chant at them, taunt them, intimidate them, and then eventually release them. And, of course, some of them came back with half of a hand. They were shot on October 7th, had fingers blown off. But the images of some of these people are so horrific, in particular the last 3 men who were released. I saw a black and white picture of the liberation of Auschwitz, and then right next to it a picture of the liberation of these 3 individuals. And the only difference between the two was that one is in black and white and one was in color. These 3 people came out as if they just walked out of Auschwitz or Bergen-Belsen. That they were tortured, they were starved, they were held in darkness, hung upside down, not given food, mentally tormented, and then eventually released in this hostage exchange. So that's who the Israelis are dealing with. That's just putting aside the savagery that they committed on October 7th. So now we're coming to the end of the first phase, and we're supposed to enter now phase 2. And just for a second to digress about these 3 individuals that looked like they just walked out of a concentration camp, this apparently had a great impact on President Trump. Apparently he was quite moved by that. I don't know how anybody couldn't be moved, but President Trump, I understand, was particularly moved. So now we're entering phase 2. So what's supposed to happen in phase 2? Phase 2 is supposed to be the time when Hamas surrenders, lays down their arms, agrees not to make war, agrees to cease to exist as a political institution, and release all the hostages. And in exchange, Israel's supposed to withdraw completely from Gaza. The only problem with phase 2 is that it's just not doable. We're more likely to land on Jupiter tomorrow than that's going to happen. Hamas is not going to lay down their arms. Hamas is not going to surrender. Hamas is not going to release all the hostages, because the minute they release all the hostages, they know all hell's going to break loose. And Israel is not prepared to give up on the hostages, so they're not going to completely withdraw unless Hamas lives up to their part of the bargain. So the ceasefire is going to fall apart. So it's very important for people to remember, particularly those people who are critical of the ceasefire in the first instance. Israel never gave up their right, and it was a big negotiating point. Israel refused to give up their right to restart the war in the event that Hamas either broke the ceasefire agreement or they failed to reach an accommodation, an agreement on phase 2 and ultimately phase 3, which is the rebuilding part of the agreement. So Israel has every right to go back to war, and that then brings us. So phase 2, I'm convinced it's not going to happen. So that brings us now to the Trump statements and the Trump policy solutions. First, the Trump statement that all the hostages better be released by noon on Saturday, and this show is being taped on Thursday, but will be aired on Sunday. And I predict that between the time of our airing and the time of our recording today and the time of our airing on Sunday, that if the full-scale war in Gaza has not restarted, it's certainly a significant uptick in hostilities, and an Israeli offensive is going to start. So I think we're going to see that pretty quickly, because Hamas is not going to release all the hostages by noon on Saturday. And God bless Donald Trump for saying this, because this is the kind of resolve that we needed from the first day. This is why you didn't have the ceasefire originally when Joe Biden was saying, what's the big deal? I proposed this back in May. Because the difference was that when you got to phase 2, both Hamas and the Israelis knew that the Biden administration would put pressure on Israel to make additional concessions to get phase 2 done. When Trump became president, Israel understood and knew, and has so far been 100% correct, that Donald Trump will put the pressure on Hamas to make sure they abide by the letter of the agreement.
Where it should have been always.
Where it should have been always, exactly. This war would have been over months ago, a year ago, if the Israelis had been given the green light to win the war and had full American support with no space between the United States and Israel. This war would have been over and lives would have been saved. But the illogical and inane and insane policy of de-escalation, which is the 21st century term for appeasement and surrender, that's why this war is continuing to go on. But now let's look at the Trump policy solution to what's going on in Gaza. Trump has said that the Gazans maybe should leave without a right of return. that you can't rebuild Gaza as long as people are there. I mean, that's just a physical fact. That's just a natural fact. Two things can't be in the same place at the same time. And the other is that America will take over and we'll build condos and luxury apartments. The fact that he says these two things, it's almost irrelevant that these are the two precise policy prescriptions. But what matters is, and where Trump is 100% right, is that what we've been advocating for the last 80 years has failed and will continue to fail. There will be no two-state solution. There will be no two states. The Israelis said yes to two states in 1948, in 2000, in 2005, in 2008. And each time the Arabs said no and declared war. And what is particularly interesting is that in 1948, when the Arabs said no, 5 Arab states attacked Israel, attempted to destroy it, failed, but in the process created the Palestinian refugee problem, which persists to this day. And now we have to deal with it. But the idea for all other refugees in the history of the world, the emphasis has been on resettling, finding a better world for them, but better place for them, for their future, for their children and their future generations. The emphasis for the Palestinian refugees under UNRWA, the United Nations Workers' Relief Association for Palestinians, has been to keep the Palestinians in place, not allowing them to leave, because they are used as their mission in life is to be used as a prop. To be used as a prop, so when Israel defends itself, so that the Palestinian civilians will die, so that the Palestinian Authority or Hamas or other enemies of Israel, terrorists, can say, look at the horrible Israelis, they're killing civilians. While these cowards hide behind them, they put weapons in schools, they put weapons in mosques, they put weapons in hospitals, they put weapons in apartment buildings, all to make sure that civilians die, so they have that propaganda victory. So the Palestinians, unlike any other refugee, have been forced to stay in place. So Donald Trump has correctly said, let's let these people leave. You know what? Even if you're opposed to the Trump plan of forcing people out, how about a policy of, you want to leave, you can go?
Yes, exactly.
How many people would leave? There are 2 million people in Gaza. I'm willing to bet that at least 1 million of them will agree to go. They'll agree to leave. They don't want to be there. But Hamas won't let them leave. They'll kill them if they try to leave. But even more problematic, there are 29 Arab states, and not a single Arab state wants to take them. In 1948, Egypt illegally annexed Gaza. Nobody cared about a Palestinian state from 1948 to 1967 when Egypt populated it, annexed it, and controlled it. Now Egypt doesn't want any part of the Palestinians. I mean, after October 7th, Biden meekly asked Egypt to open up the border, the Philadelphia corridor, and allow a refugee camp to be set up inside Sinai to allow for humanitarian aid to get to civilians, and then if possible, then have the civilians be dispersed to the 29 Arab states. There are 50 countries in the world that have majority Muslim populations. I'm sure Europe would have taken some. I'm sure the United States would have taken some. Canada would have taken some. These people could have been saved, but Egypt refused to open the border. Egypt forced them to stay. Now, Hamas was thrilled with that because that's more dead bodies that they could show the New York Times or CNN or some of these other publications and media outlets. So that worked just fine for them. And it was more control for Hamas. But so even if you want to take the position that you can't force these people out, how about taking the position of, what if they want to leave? But nobody wants to do that. But what we do know is that for the last 80 years, the policies of a two-state solution, which have been rejected by the Palestinians, whether it was Arafat, Abbas, Hamas, or their supporters, Qatar, Iran, Turkey, nobody's advocating for a two-state solution. What they're advocating for is one state, an Arab state, no place for a Jewish state. Donald Trump has correctly identified the problem as to why there's no peace in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And it's really quite simple. The reason is because there has never been, there is not now, and there is no possibility, and there is no one to believe in the future, a Palestinian leader that recognizes the right of a Jewish state to live within peace and security in secure and recognized borders in the Middle East. Until that happens, there can be no peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and there will be no peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And because it isn't happening, you have to have you have to start looking at it through a different lens. And the Trump And whether you agree with the Trump prescription or not, ultimately, of what has to happen, where Trump is 1,000% correct, is that the way of looking at it since 1948 has failed and will continue to fail. And that, and when you want to take a broader picture of it, Saudi Arabia, we're back and forth on whether or not Saudi Arabia really insists on a two-state solution. On October 6th, when Israel and Saudi Arabia were close to Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, there was no requirement of a Palestinian state. That only came about after October 7th, when Joe Biden became insistent on a Palestinian state and put Saudi Arabia in the position of, I'm a Saudi king. I can't I can't be in a position being less supportive of the Palestinians than an American president. So he kind of had to move a little bit. So where is he now? If you ask Donald Trump, MBS doesn't really care about a two-state solution, doesn't really care about a Palestinian state. And MBS publicly is saying, we really do. But then they're talking about now an accommodation. I take the Trump the version of it, because I truly believe to take the contrary position is basically Saudi Arabia saying, we are going to hand over our foreign policy and national security to the Palestinians, to Hamas. We will not make peace unless they make peace. They'll decide for us whether or not we're going to make peace with Israel. They will decide for us whether or not we're going to enter the 21st century. They're going to decide for us whether or not our population is going to have a full and fulsome and prosperous, peaceful future. That's insane. That's not going to happen. MBS is going to decide for Saudi Arabia what their policies will be. So ultimately, I think to the extent the Saudis are giving lip service to a Palestinian state, they're going to back away from that, and they're going to fudge that, and they'll find some other language. But Donald Trump is correct. Maybe his policy prescriptions are not ultimately the ones that are going to be implemented. But what we do know is that the paradigm is already changing. The king of Jordan said he's going to start taking some Palestinians, not that many, 2,000 wounded children, but maybe that's going to start to change. And the Jordan issue is an interesting one. I can go on forever, but if we have a chance, we could talk about it a little bit. And Egypt, I think you're going to start seeing taking some folks, some of the Palestinian people, but it's going to change. And Donald Trump is, in this respect, is truly a change agent, and this is the change for the better.
I agree with you, and has a long history. He was the one who did the Abraham Accords in his first term. He's the one who brought the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem after decades of being discussed and never happening. I just want to touch base on what you said, and thank you for that very comprehensive and very easy to understand status of where we are right now. I agree with you that Trump first saying that there would be hell to pay if a ceasefire or hostages were not released before he took office on January 20th. That got the ball rolling and moving forward by Hamas and such. Also, right now, as we see this and we don't know as a taping of this what's going to happen on noon on Saturday, but certainly what Trump says, I want to use his exact language because he's been using language a lot better than he did in his first term. He said that Trump said that he proposed to Israel to cancel any agreement altogether if the hostages are not released by noon on Saturdays, and, quote, let hell break out unless, again, quote, all the hostages were returned. I think that type of policy issue or statement on foreign policy is critical. It's the type of backing that Israel needed from day one in this conflict because they didn't bring this on. Also, we've discussed this on the show many times. This is all a bunch of proxy wars going on against Israel, the United States, our allies. And what we're seeing here now also is where is Iran in all this? They are seeing the United States that is shoulder to shoulder with Israel. And also, we also know that in Arab states all want this war to end, and in turn, most importantly, an end to Iran being dictating and issuing these proxy wars and funding these proxy wars and terrorism in the region. In fact, to this point, it's been my understanding that, and I've read in a number of places, that Arab countries are pressuring Hamas to move forward with this, taking their lead from the Trump administration, and that they're prepared to do it. And you were right. You said that this was a 3-section deal. The second part was always going to be the problem. But in that time period, something important domestically for this national security of Israel took place. It allowed their armed forces, their armed forces, to replenish themselves, to rest, to recover, recoup, and rearm in preparation of what we expected. What you brought forward, what Rich, who did not like this, Judge Weinberg, who did not like this deal and ceasefire from the beginning.
Yeah, this is why he went to Florida. He was afraid to defend his position. Coward.
But what I also like when we talked about the reconstruction of Gaza. Now, listen, I jokingly say that's what happens when you elect a developer. But I say that as a joke, but in seriousness, because now, through language, through actions as well, Egypt is now discussing a reconstruction plan for Gaza. Not the same one as Trump is, but the dialogue is now moving forward that you can't rebuild Gaza with the citizens there laying in rubble. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, and I think you're 100% right about Trump's role in this. But who was Trump's first foreign visitor? Head of state. It was Bibi Netanyahu.
Exactly.
Right. That was the very first, that sends a very loud message. And what was also very publicly announced was the sale of billions of dollars in weapons from the United States to Israel. They made sure that everybody on the planet knew that was happening. This is in stark contrast to the arms embargo that the Biden administration had put in place. Now, all of a sudden, billions of dollars. Exactly.
Tying it to different conditions.
There are no conditions. Are you're going to win? The conditions are as long as you comply with the international rules of law, have at it, and you're going to do what you need to do. But to your point about Iran, and I think it can't be overemphasized enough. This is all about Iran. Part of the reason why that is part of the reason why it made sense for Israel to make this deal, so they can rearm and rest up with the military, is the sad fact is, if every member of Hamas was killed, if every member of Hezbollah was killed, if every Houthi dropped dead, if every Iran-backed terrorist in Iraq and Syria all died, this would eventually all repeat itself unless and until there's regime change in Iran. The Iranian regime has got to go. Now, that doesn't mean we should be putting boots on the ground to push them out. But it does mean that an attack on their nuclear facilities is necessary, and now is absolutely the time to do it. The Israelis have eliminated all their missile defense. They're naked, they're exposed, and these weapons hopefully are going to be used soon, and hopefully with American support, but if not, American military active support, but if not American active political support to go after Iran, because that's really the only way to have a long-term solution to all of this. And I am again told by Ava, who's truly in control of all of this, that we're out of time for this section, and we'll be back in a minute.
This is Let the Record Show.
Lights, camera, innovation. Walt Disney Studios chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform the movie-making process. Together, we kept a remote production hub in Hawaii and sync with a team in California to bring Lilo and Stitch to theaters this summer. This is picture-perfect collaboration. This is Walt Disney Studios with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Shopping is hard.
I can never find anything in my size.
I don't even know my size.
I buy my clothes the same place I buy my groceries.
There's a better way. Make it easy with Stitch Fix. Just share your size, style, budget, and done. Your personal stylist sends pieces picked just for you.
That was easy.
Stitch Fix. Online personal styling for everyone. Free shipping and returns. No subscription required. Get started today at StitchFix.com.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLSConsumerAccess.org, number 3030.
At Sephora, we've got what you want because you're obsessed with your skin and we're obsessed with what it needs. Sephora has the best products to help you get beautiful, glowing, radiant skin. With an extensive, inclusive range of results-driven formulas and in-store beauty advisors to help you find exactly which are right for you, the best skincare is only at Sephora. Sephora, for all your skincare.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. I'm your co-host, Jesse Garcia, who also serves as the chairman of the Suffolk County Republican Committee and the vice chair of the downstate New York State Republican Committee. With me is my wonderful friend and co-host, too, Eric Levine, an essayist, renowned lawyer. He's a media personality and joins us on a regular basis. And our dear friend, Judge Weinberg, is in Florida, left the keys to us, so we're taking the show out for a ride without him. And we'll see. Eric, I don't think he's ever going to let us do this again without him. What do you think?
Not if he's a smart guy. Not if he's as smart as he thinks he is. Let's put it that way.
This is true. So bringing it back home, as of the airing, the taping of this show on Thursday, a number of different additional cabinet members have been confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Tulsi Gabbard as the National Intelligence Director, RFK Jr. For Health and Human Services. And what's another thing we touched upon a little bit is that Kash Patel passed a critical test by being voted out to the full Senate from committee. So now his confirmation is on the clock. So as of now, 15 of the 22 confirmations, 15 of the 22 announced positions to be confirmed by the Senate, the major ones that are part of the cabinet, have been done. I do want to put in a plug for Suffolk's own favorite son, Lee Zeldin, who was confirmed about 2 weeks ago as the administrator of the EPA, and already, and we can maybe get into this a little bit later, has already identified and wants to crawl back about $20 billion in taxpayer monies that were rushed by the Biden administration for these failed Green New Deal policies and green initiatives that really has stymied America's ability to become energy efficient. Now, we're going to have a little bit of a couple of different ideas on these confirmations from this past week. We'll save maybe Tulsi Gabbard for either the middle or the end. But let's start first because we touched base about the FBI and the need for, that to be put on that agency, not the rank and file members of the agency, the FBI agents, the ones who really do the hard work and have taken their oath and are working hard every day to keep us safe in a variety of different manners and a variety of different investigations. But just a culture there where politics is the word of the day, the policy of the day, as opposed to really the rule of law. From your point of view, from being a lawyer and seeing where this has been, and you have identified the lawfare and the weaponization of agencies like the Department of Justice, Eric, what does a Kash Patel do to the FBI? For me, I think he's a disruptor. He's a former, I believe he's a number 2 guy in the FBI under the first Trump administration, and it's someone who believes in the institution, its mission, but also will not allow it to be weaponized or engage in lawfare. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's no reason not to take Kash Patel at his word. And I agree with you. He's a disruptor, and an organization like the FBI, unfortunately, does need some significant disrupting, given what's going on in some of the higher echelons within the FBI. And I think Kash Patel potentially could do a great deal of good if he sticks to his word. There's no reason to doubt him. That the FBI is going to get back to its mission of law enforcement and investigations and not lawfare. That he is not going to be seeking out retribution against people that may not have done things that he agrees with, so long as they've complied with the law. I mean, look, I think it's important to distinguish between higher level officials in the FBI who took it upon themselves to issue directives and establish their own policies, and in some cases break the law or engage in lawfare to advance a political agenda of their own, and lower level folks who are for lack of a better unfortunate term, just following orders. They're doing what they're told to do. It's their jobs. I mean, they're not doing anything illegal. Their bosses tell them to do that. So those lower level people who are, let's say, were engaged in the January 6th investigations, they were doing it because they were assigned to that task, and that was their job to do it, and they certainly shouldn't be punished for that. But some people who may have gone outside the lines in trying to prosecute some of the January 6th protesters, or some people who have engaged in lawfare or leaked information unlawfully, those are the people that really need to be weeded out. But as long as Kash Patel is true to his word, and again, I have no reason to doubt that this is the case, that the FBI will get back to its core mission of investigations and law enforcement, I think we can all rest easier at night knowing that the FBI is on the job, rather than showing up in townships in Virginia, declaring parents domestic terrorists and going after them because they are advocating for their children and students in the schools against DEI or some other social justice agenda. And if we can get back to that, I think Kash Patel will have done his job.
Yeah, and let's not forget, I mean, people think it's just lawfare against a sitting president or political opponents, but remember that the Department of Justice had a mission of going after parents who went before school board members. They went after people who believe in that life begins at a conception, and they were demonstrating peacefully. If they weren't peaceful, then they should have been arrested. But those being arrested peacefully, demonstrating peacefully in front of abortion clinics, they were being investigated. And what was funny is that, and I think we discussed this a bit. Number one, you and I are in agreement. You touch a cop, you stay in jail. You go to jail. That
has to be a golden rule. That must be a golden rule.
Absolutely. But there are others that outside of that realm that were given excessive sentences or excessive sentences were sought on their behalf. And then we find out that the FBI had admitted to 4, but had as many as 26 criminal informants inside the crowd on January 6th of 2021. I mean, those are the type of antics that we need to wipe out of our systems, because I think Donald Trump connected with the average American when he said, if they can do this to me, they can do it to you. And that's a prevailing feeling that made Americans leery and lose confidence in their institutions of government. Another example, and maybe I'm going on a tangent here, is that the Biden administration and the Democrats that controlled both chambers of Congress decided it was important to hire 80,000 new IRS agents and did not place any border officers on the southern border or now even the northern border. I think that's a change of policy and the change that needs to be weeded out of our institutions of government. Don't you think?
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. And you talk about what's going on with, how the January 6th protesters were treated. Look, you and I could not agree more. You touch a cop, you go to prison, and you're not deserving of a pardon. That's my view. But the key point is, when you talk about a First Amendment or breaking the law, people are entitled to their speech, as abhorrent as it may be. People are entitled to their independent thought, as crazy as we may think it is. But there's some conduct that you're not entitled to. Compare the Biden administration's response to the explosion of anti-Semitism on our college campuses, when they're setting up tent cities, taunting Jewish students, taunting supporters of Israel, shouting down pro-Israel speakers, not allowing classes to go on, completely disrupting the operation of a campus. That somehow all of a sudden became protected speech. That wasn't protected speech. That was intimidation. That was threatening. That was conduct. That was illegal conduct. But by the Biden administration and those on the left, it all of a sudden became protected speech. But for someone who takes a conservative perspective. Now, I happen to be a pro-choice Republican, but I think someone who's pro-life is entitled to that point of view, and they're entitled to peacefully protest. But somehow, if you are a speaker and you come out and you're pro-life, or you're a speaker and you want to show up and you're pro-Israel, or take some other conservative position on an issue, all of a sudden that speech is not protected, because that speech is harmful. That speech under the social justice DEI agenda is actionable. It's actually an affirmative assault on you, your poor ears and your poor heart and your poor mind. So it completely turns the idea for the First Amendment on its head. So the First Amendment speech becomes unprotected, and unprotected First Amendment speech becomes protected. So when you kind of get the rational world view of Donald Trump on this particular issue, and Kash Patel's view on this particular issue, and I think the Supreme Court's and the Constitution's express position on this issue, it gets us back to a balance of sanity. And that's where we need to be. The way to counter speech that you find offensive is with better speech, not tent cities, not intimidation. And that's been the left's approach. And that's what's been protected by the progressive wing of the party. Chuck Schumer went into the witness protection program. He became a mute. He became incapable of speaking out against this stuff, so he left it to others. Thank God for people like John Fetterman in the Democratic Party. But we have to get back to the idea that speech is speech and illegal conduct is illegal conduct. And in most cases, there's a pretty bright line, and we need to start enforcing that line.
Now, RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr., confirmed as the Secretary of Health for the administration. Certainly, I think one of the things we can agree, whether maybe we can disagree or have a debate about his policies, is that one of the things we've seen in these confirmation hearings was not the Senate Democrats trying to exert their consent portion of the Constitution, where the president, nominates and the Senate consents and guides on those confirmations, but just making speech after speech after speech, political speech after political speech, and not allowing whether it be RFK or anyone else to answer the questions, because all that we're looking for is a soundbite. All that we're looking for is to create this far left chorus of what's good and what's bad. As it's my understanding that RFK passed by 52 votes. Mitch McConnell voted no, as he did for Tulsi Gabbard, and I believe one other member that escapes me at the moment. I believe it was the Secretary of Defense.
Pete Hegseth, yeah.
Pete Hegseth, thank you. So right now, I think one of the things that is important, and listen, I have this is close to home and my family, about the fact of the needs that we need to go back to, a more, Whole Foods type of situation, really take a scrutiny of what we're doing here. Using science properly, and not using science like they did under the Biden and the Democrats administration, where they mandated masks or vaccines and such. You make that available, just like you said. When it comes to Gaza, if Palestinians want to leave, they should be left to leave. If Americans did not want to take that vaccination, they shouldn't have to take that vaccination. Where are your thoughts here with the ascension of RFK Jr. to the position of Secretary of Health?
Well, from what I've heard on his position on vaccines, we just see the world differently. Hopefully, vaccines won't become a political football, and that there are some vaccines, like the polio vaccine in particular, that there's no evidence that they cause autism or have any other side effect other than stamping out polio. So on that issue, I think I do have differences with RFK. But I think it's important to realize that, for the most part, a president is entitled to their choices.
Yes.
For the most part, there are exceptions, and sometimes if it's a policy issue, look, the president won, and the president, he gets to choose who's going to, spearhead a particular policy. But where RFK, I think, hits the right tone is the point you were making on eating healthy foods.
Yes.
The processed foods, the saturated fats. We have an obesity crisis in our country. He's identified that. He wants to go after that. That's all for the good. So there's a package here, and it remains to be seen what kind of HHS head he'll be. But he'll be out there in the public, making his speeches, taking positions. The Congress will play an important role in the event that he goes off the reservation, or in the event that he wants to pass legislation that helps deal with some of the obesity crisis in particular, I guess. So I'm not so troubled by the RFK. Wouldn't have been my choice, but by the same token, I wasn't elected president. So as shocking as that may sound, but so RFK is, I think RFK will work out okay. And if he doesn't, then, people will speak up and the political process will take its course.
Well, as you said, as we go to Tulsi Gabbard, the president is entitled to put his team together. I know Tulsi Gabbard is one that you have had issues with. I, in part, want to, and I know how critical this position is as the director of national intelligence, where that she is the individual, that position is the individual that meets with the president on a daily basis and basically outlines the conditions of the day and the threats of the day that the United States is facing, both from a foreign power perspective and such. Do you think that, before we get into her differences on Snowden and whatnot, do you think that Tulsi Gabbard and RFK got more ridicule and more vitriol from the Democrats that they stood on those respective committees because they were Democrats that left their party, rejected the policies of the Democratic Party, and now we're joining a Republican administration that basically, whitewashed, blew away the Democrats, from in the Senate, the House, both nationally, with Trump leading the ticket. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that they're viewed as traitors by the Democrats. These were people that were good, upstanding Democrats for decades. Tulsi Gabbard, remember, she left her position at the DNC to become co-chair of the Bernie Sanders campaign for president in 2016.
Ran for president in 2016?
Ran for president.
As a Democrat?
She supported Bernie in 2016 to become... Yeah. Right. So... Okay. And then, I'm
sorry, 2020. I apologize.
Right. So she supported Bernie, and then when she supported Trump, no doubt that she was viewed as a traitor by the Democrats, and they were not going to make an easy path for her. And similarly, RFK is also viewed as a traitor, not just by Democrats, but by apparently the vast majority of the Kennedy family. But she who is in charge of all, Ava, is giving me the signal that we are out of time. Jesse, thank you. This was a great exchange. All I could say is Richard who?
We're going to hide the keys to the radio show so we can't find them.
Exactly. You want to sign us off?
You sign us off, my friend.
Okay, so this has been Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg in absentia, co-host Jesse Garcia, and regular guest Eric Levine. Thank you for listening. We look forward to speaking to you next week.
This is Let the Record Show.
Plan on flying? In order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a real ID. Learn how to get your real ID today at tsa.gov/realid or visit your local DMV.